The Khan once said, "Noise is the weapon of the weak. Silence is the armor of the strong." Before a battle, even the horses hold their breath. The wind stops. The world listens. It is in that stillness that power gathers. Invisible, disciplined, unshakable. Most men fear silence because in it, their thoughts become loud. They run toward noise, opinions, distractions, endless movement, hoping to drown what they refuse to face. But the warrior who learns to sit in the quiet learns to master every force that seeks to control him. The path of silence is not the path of withdrawal. It is the path of command. When the Khan rode into enemy lands, he did not shout. He observed. He listened to the wind, to the rhythm of fear in the enemy's camp, to the pulse of his own men. Then he struck once, and the steppe went silent again. So too must the modern warrior act. In a world of constant noise, silence becomes rebellion. It becomes strategy. It becomes the invisible throne from which the mind rules emotion and the man rules his destiny. Before the warrior lifts his sword, he must first lift his silence. Without silence, the mind becomes like a restless horse, strong but useless. Every impulse drags it in a new direction: anger, desire, fear, pride. But when silence is trained like a blade, it cuts through illusion. Genghis Khan understood this. He ruled not by speaking more, but by speaking less. Each word carried the weight of storms because it was born from stillness. In council, his generals would argue, voices clashing like steel. He would listen, motionless, his eyes fixed on the map before him. The silence would stretch until it broke their pride. Then, with one sentence, he would command the course of empires. Silence is not absence. It is presence without noise. It is the breath before the arrow flies, the calm before the river floods. Only in silence does the warrior feel the truth of his own pulse. Men who fear silence seek control over others. They talk to convince, manipulate, seduce, because they cannot command themselves. But the silent man, grounded and steady, cannot be manipulated. He reveals nothing that the world can twist. He acts when others react. He becomes the storm that waits, not the leaf that trembles. In this age, noise is the new battlefield. Screens scream opinions. Crowds demand instant answers. The fool thinks that loudness means strength. But power lies in restraint. To say nothing when insulted, to pause when provoked, that is the silence that breaks armies. The warrior must practice this discipline daily. Not meditation as escape, but silence as command. Stand alone beneath the wind. Let the noise of the world pass like dust. Do not answer every message, every voice, every demand. Let others chase echoes. Remain the mountain that listens. When one masters stillness, manipulation dies. Because manipulation feeds on reaction. If you do not react, you cannot be controlled. If you do not explain, you cannot be misread. If you do not fear silence, you hold the field. In silence, even lies lose their grip. A manipulator needs noise, arguments, defenses, confessions. Take away the noise, and he is naked before your calm. This is why silence is feared. It exposes weakness without saying a word. Train your silence like a sword. Keep it sharp and hidden. Use it not to escape the world, but to rule it with unseen strength. When you can stand in stillness while the world screams for your attention, then you are ready to command your life as the Khan commanded his empire. Not through force, but through unshakable presence. The Khan's greatest victories were not born from numbers, but from listening. He heard what others ignored, the silence between words, the fear behind a soldier's tone, the hesitation in an enemy's breath. In that silence, truth revealed itself, like a shadow under moonlight. To master silence, the warrior must learn to listen beyond sound. Words are only the surface of meaning. Noise can deceive. Tone never lies. When the Khan's scouts returned, bringing news from distant lands, he did not interrupt. He let them speak until their words ran dry. Then he watched their eyes. He felt the rhythm of their breathing. He listened to what they did not dare to say. This is the essence of inner power, to hear without needing to answer, to see without needing to judge. Modern men drown in information, but starve for understanding. They speak before they observe, react before they reflect. To them, silence feels like weakness, but in truth, it is the highest form of control. Because when you listen long enough, others reveal their entire strategy without realizing it. Silence disarms the manipulator. It makes him impatient. He needs your reaction to feed his illusion of dominance. But when faced with your calm, your steady eyes, your breathing slow, his power withers. He begins to explain himself, justify himself, expose himself. He is undone by his own noise. The warrior listens not only to others, but to himself. When anger rises, he listens. When desire burns, he listens. When doubt whispers, he listens. In that listening, he sees that every emotion is just a visitor, and none deserve to rule his kingdom. Genghis Khan could sense storms before the clouds appeared. He read the silence of the land, the way the wind changed, the movement of birds, the unease of horses before a coming raid. He understood. The world always speaks, but only to those who are silent enough to hear it. So, warrior, let the world talk. Let the crowd shout. Listen for the still thread beneath it all, the pulse that reveals truth. When you train your ear for the unspoken, you will never again be blinded by noise or seduced by false words. True command begins when you stop trying to be understood and start understanding. Remember this: he who listens owns the conversation. He who speaks too soon becomes its prisoner. Master the silence between words, and no one will ever rule your mind again. There are words that build empires, and there are silences that bend them. The Khan understood that the true weight of command lies not in speech, but in the unsaid. For what is left unspoken becomes sacred. It becomes the law of mystery, the gravity that draws all things toward it. A ruler who explains himself too much loses his aura. A warrior who defends himself with words exposes his weakness. The Khan knew. When power speaks, it need not justify. The river does not explain its flow. The storm does not apologize for its thunder. So too must the warrior speak only when silence has already declared his intent. In battle, the Khan often stood upon a rise watching his enemies before the charge. He did not shout commands. He lifted his hand, and tens of thousands moved. No words, only the understanding born of discipline and presence. The gesture was enough because silence had trained them all to listen beyond noise. The power of the unsaid begins with mastery of the self. To hold one's tongue is to hold one's temper. To hold one's emotion is to control one's destiny. The fool interrupts silence to prove that he exists. The wise man remains quiet because his existence is unquestionable. Every manipulator feeds on words. They provoke, flatter, demand, twist. They seek cracks in conversation to plant control. But if the warrior stays silent, offering nothing, they find no handle to grip, no reaction to exploit. They become uneasy, then desperate, for silence is a mirror that shows them who they truly are. The unsaid is not emptiness. It is the battlefield where meanings fight for dominance. To master it is to master timing, to know when to speak and when to let the air carry your will. In the steppe, silence ruled all things. The wolves hunted in quiet. The riders moved under stars without a word. Even death came softly like snow. To speak too much in such a world was to waste breath. And the Khan built an empire from breath saved and focus preserved. So it must be in the modern war, the war of influence, distraction, and deceit. Today, the loudest voices are often the emptiest. The world trades truth for attention. To resist is to become what others cannot understand. A force that acts without announcing, that decides without display. There is a moment in every conflict when silence wins the battle, when the other side expects rage but receives calm, when they prepare for an argument but meet eyes like stone. That is the power of the unsaid. It unbalances, confuses, commands. To live by this principle, one must cultivate 3 disciplines. First, pause before every word. Ask if it is needed, or if silence would speak louder. Second, listen to the space between sounds. That is where truth hides, not in the noise of what people say, but in the tremor of what they fear to admit. Third, carry yourself as if every silence you hold is a crown no one else can see, because it is. The man who commands silence commands respect without demanding it. The Khan's silence was his signature. He used it as others use armies, to surround, to suffocate, to conquer. And when he did speak, the world listened, as if the wind itself had turned to words. Remember, warrior, what you leave unsaid becomes legend, and legends move men long after words are forgotten. Before the warrior conquers the world, he must conquer his own noise. No empire survives if its walls are built on emotion. No man endures if his mind remains unguarded. Silence is the fortress within. It is not a prison, but a citadel, one built from patience, guarded by awareness, and ruled by a mind that no longer bends to chaos. When the Khan rode across the steppe, storms rose without warning. Dust blinded men, winds screamed like ghosts, horses panicked, but he did not. He would wait, unmoving, until the storm passed, because he understood what few men ever do. No storm lasts forever, and the man who can remain calm outlasts the wind itself. So too must the modern warrior hold his silence amid confusion. Noise comes in many forms: words, screens, opinions, temptations. Every voice seeks entry into your mind, and the moment you let one in, you've opened the gates. The fortress begins to crumble. Build your silence as a wall against manipulation, not to isolate yourself, but to filter what is worthy. Let every word that reaches you pass through the gate of discipline. Ask, does this strengthen me or weaken me? If it weakens, let it die outside your walls. The mind that never rests becomes a city under siege. Each distraction is a battering ram, each argument an invading army. Only silence can repair the breaches. It closes the gates, raises the drawbridge, and restores command to the throne within. To maintain this fortress, 3 sentinels must always stand watch. 1. Focus. The ability to hold attention where you choose, not where the world drags it. A wandering mind is an unguarded gate. The Khan taught his men that a single arrow aimed with purpose is worth more than 100 shot in panic. 2. Patience. Every manipulator seeks urgency, the illusion that you must react now. Silence breaks that illusion. When you pause, their power evaporates. No one can rush a man who walks at his own pace. 3. Emotional detachment, not coldness, but command. Feel deeply, but do not let feelings choose for you. Even compassion must obey discipline. A warrior's heart must be vast but never exposed. Inside this fortress of silence, the warrior becomes untouchable. Insults echo, but never enter. Deception fades before it reaches the gate. Praise, too, is treated with suspicion, for flattery is often the softest form of control. Understand this. He who can remain silent under attack does not lose the argument. He wins the war, because his enemy reveals everything, while he reveals nothing. The Khan once told his sons, "Let others burn their words like firewood. Our fire will be discipline, eternal and unseen." So too must your silence burn within you, a heat that strengthens, not consumes. When you no longer react, you can see clearly. When you see clearly, you can act precisely. And when your actions rise from silence, they carry the inevitability of fate. The fortress within is not built in a day. Each moment of restraint lays a new stone. Each breath of patience raises another wall. And one day, without realizing, you will find yourself standing in a silence so vast that no manipulation, no noise, no deceit can reach you. That is when the Khan inside you awakens, not to shout but to reign. Power is not always declared. Sometimes it is simply felt. Before a single word leaves your mouth, the world has already read your posture, your eyes, your stillness. Presence is a language older than speech, the silent dialect of command. Genghis Khan understood this truth long before scholars named it. He could walk into a camp of restless warriors and bring order without lifting his voice. No gesture, no shout, no threat, only his calm, deliberate movement. Every soldier sensed it, a force that needed no sound. Such is the language of presence, a silence that speaks through every breath. To master this language, a warrior must first empty himself of the need to impress. Noise is the armor of insecurity. Men speak loudly when they doubt their worth. They laugh too hard, explain too much, promise too often. But presence begins when explanation ends. It is the weight of a man who no longer needs to prove. Think of the hawk. It circles high above the earth, silent, unseen. It wastes no movement, no cry. And when it strikes, there is no warning, only precision. That is presence, efficiency in motion, silence made visible. Modern men believe influence comes from visibility. They seek followers, applause, attention. But true authority begins in invisibility, in the strength that doesn't beg to be seen, in the silence that demands respect without words. When you enter a room, your energy speaks before your mouth does. If you carry noise inside, the room feels it, scattered, uneasy. If you carry silence, everything around you slows. People lower their tone, their eyes meet yours, their posture adjusts. They may not know why, but they feel that something steady has entered their space. Presence is born of alignment. When your thoughts, your breath, and your actions move as one, you radiate command. The world senses a man who is whole, and wholeness is louder than any speech. The Khan's presence was forged through endless solitude, nights beneath the steppe sky, alone with the wind and his thoughts, until every fear within him grew quiet. Only then did his silence gain weight, for silence without depth is emptiness, but silence built from self-understanding becomes gravity. To cultivate such presence, practice these 3 arts. First, speak less than you think. Every time you withhold a word, you gather strength. Every silence you choose adds weight to the next word you do speak. Second, move slowly and with purpose. Rushed movements reveal anxiety. Deliberate motion declares control. The Khan said, "Even the smallest step should carry the weight of 1,000 miles." Third, breathe like the earth, slow, grounded, unbroken. Breath is the bridge between thought and action. When the breath steadies, the spirit rules. The manipulator fears this kind of silence, for he cannot read it, cannot provoke it. He will try to disturb your calm, to drag you into his storm. But when your presence is rooted, you become immovable. He will exhaust himself against your stillness, like waves against stone. Remember, warrior, speech can be argued, silence cannot, presence cannot. Let your silence be a sentence, let your stillness be a weapon. Let your mere existence speak for itself, and you will never need to defend yourself again. The Khan ruled men with armies, but he conquered them with silence. The Khan once said, "He who rules others may be powerful, but he who rules himself is unstoppable." And there lies the final truth of silence. It is not only power, but liberation. The man who masters silence no longer serves the noise of the world. He becomes the world's witness, not its prisoner. Noise is the chain of the modern age. Every shout, every demand, every argument pulls at the mind until it forgets its own voice. Men react instead of act. They live in echoes, chasing validation, defending illusions. But silence breaks the chain, not by resistance, but by release. When the warrior no longer feels the need to answer every challenge, he becomes untouchable. Freedom begins when one no longer dances to the rhythm of provocation. Let others speak in haste. Let them drown in their own noise. The silent man watches, calm, patient, calculating. His decisions arise like mountains, slow and eternal. He no longer explains, persuades, or begs to be understood. He walks his path, and the world either follows or fades behind him. The greatest manipulation is not done by others, but by the mind itself, by its endless dialogue, its craving for approval, its fear of silence. To conquer that voice is to reclaim the throne of the spirit. The Khan's victories began in his own thoughts, where chaos was silenced and purpose sharpened like a blade. The warrior must learn to sit in silence as one would sit beside a fire. At first, the flames of thought dance wildly, memories, regrets, plans, fears. But if he stays unmoving, the fire settles, the smoke clears, and only warmth remains. That warmth is peace, the peace that cannot be manipulated, because it does not depend on anything outside. When you reach that silence, the world changes. Voices lose their power to disturb. You no longer argue to be right. You simply are. Every action becomes deliberate, every word necessary. Your life becomes a single statement, calm, precise, inevitable. Understand this. Freedom does not mean escaping the world, but moving through it untouched. To walk among noise and remain silent inside, that is mastery. that is sovereignty. The Khan's empire fell, but his silence still rides through time. It whispers in the discipline of every warrior, in the eyes of every leader who commands without shouting. For silence is not absence, it is essence. It is the invisible empire that no enemy can burn. So, warrior, when the storms of manipulation rise again, remember this final command of the Khan. Speak when words will move mountains. Stay silent when mountains can move without words. Rule your thoughts. Guard your silence. Act with precision. And when the world screams for your reaction, breathe once and let silence answer for you, because the man who has mastered silence cannot be controlled, cannot be deceived, and cannot be defeated. He is no longer a warrior among men. He is the Khan of his own spirit.